Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Packet Protector, the podcast at the intersection of networking and security. I'm Jennifer J.J. Manella, here with Drew Conry Murray, and we have a special guest joining us today. Secrets trickle out through misconfigurations, poor tooling, and rushed Git commits. And today's guest, John Howard, has spent 20 years making and breaking networks, and he continues that as the head of network infrastructure at Proton. Maybe you guys have heard of Proton. He's joining us today to walk through practical secrets management with Vault and TruffleHog. He shares some bonus tips on certificate automation and why SSH keys on a jumpbox ain't the way forward for us.
Yeah, this show is based on a talk that John did at the AutoCon 3 conference in May 2025. I thought it combined networking and security really well, which is, where Packet Protector sits. So we're going to talk about how to not expose your privates, meaning private secrets, things you don't want exposed. So it's a great conversation. And if you are new to Vault, then you'll get a great intro from John. So, John, welcome to the podcast. And I thought this would be a great discussion because, as we say at the intro of the show, Packet Protector is about the intersection of network and security. And it seems like your lightning talk sits right in that space. So first, just for some context, what is HashiCorp Vault for folks who may not be familiar with it?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. One of the things I find interesting is that Vault is basically an implementation of a secret store. Its purpose in life is to hold information that you probably should not bake into your code or your operational procedures. Much like a vault in a bank is a place where you put money you don't want people to get to. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of smaller, places where you could put things like a safety deposit box, which we call secret engines in Vault. And you can then generate or just store information that you want to be able to retrieve later programmatically. The whole concept is that there is these secret engines that are then protected by policies, which are rules effectively that say who can access what and when, which are then kind of, we back it up by what you could call a ledger, again, using the bank analogy, audit logging, that makes sure that, you have clear understanding of what's going on where, who's doing what, when and how. And more specifically, is very clever about the way that it allows people to access the information. So it's very flexible, it's very capable. You can just download it and run it as a single binary. And I think one of the things that I really like about Vault and its contemporary OpenBao, which we'll talk about, I guess, in a minute, is that the documentation is fantastic. That's the biggest thing for me. The information you need to get going is there.
The D word.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think, and companies that do a good job of documentation should be called out and applauded for it. So yeah, appreciate you highlighting that. And just for more context, what do we mean by secrets? I assume it's not just, something you told your friend about your boss.
No. To be fair, some days it might be. Passphrases are very useful things, Drew. So a secret can take many different forms. So the most common form of secret inside a Vault is stored inside a key value store, which is basically just a connection of a key and a value. And for many people, the key might be the word username and the value might be a username. And the key password maybe and contain super secure password exclamation mark. And that's the simplest form you can take. But there are a number of other things along this line. So you can use it to build a private key infrastructure, so certificate authority. You can use it to manage your authentication downstream of the product. And there are a number of other features, which I think we'll probably touch on as we go along. But the dumbest answer here is it's just things that you're going to need to use multiple times in an automation workflow that describe or give you an opportunity to maybe log into something else or access something that really you shouldn't bake into the code in the first place.
Okay.
And John, so I'm really ignorant when it comes to, anything DevOps related, but it kind of sounds like this tool, if I'm just thinking of it from a security perspective, it sounds a little bit like secrets management, but with kind of a PIM-PAM element, because it sounds like you said you can kind of keep the secrets there and these non-human identities and tokens or whatever, but it also has policies in place to dictate who has access to what and privileges related to those things.
It follows a lot of the design patterns that people are used to finding in places like the public cloud, where you have the IAM policies that are describing what a particular actor, agent, or thing is able to reach. So yeah, there is a strong amount of control that you can deploy. I think that is a blessing as much as it is a curse. Because let's face it, when you're faced with the complexity of how to set something like this up, it's quite daunting. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to do this in the first place, to make sure that people have the opportunity to see something that works, that is tangible. And realistically, for us, it gives us the opportunity as network automation people to kind of get started and grounded in reason and fact, and then grow upon it. Because let's be honest, we're all copy pasters. We all go on the internet, find a blog that says, do this. So, I'm doing that too. I'm perpetuating this myth in this particular circumstance. But I think it's valuable for people to have an opportunity to see something that is functional and then grow from there. Because, I mean, it's relatively well known who I work for. I work at Proton, which is one of the larger privacy companies on the internet. And, in my team, I run a bunch of engineers who are all building network infrastructure from the ground up. And we have to use on-premise infrastructure because, we can't trust the cloud. So we need to ensure that we build workflows that are sustainable and will kind of take us from doing nothing to doing everything. And it's difficult if we don't have access to some of these developer tools that other people have had for many years. For us, it's important that we can leverage the experience of the community to be able to help us. And in some ways, this is us paying that back.
So yeah, you touched on something that I want to bring up. You are a network engineer and network architect, but Vault to me, I always sort of had in the, DevOps world or infrastructure as code world. So what are you doing with it?
We're all developers now, Drew. We're all automation architects now. We're all engineers. The thing that's funny is, particularly in the ChatGPT generation of vibe coding and all of these things that have been happening over the last 6 to 9 months or so, 2 years at a stretch if you want to look in certain different distances. The discipline of network engineering specifically has kind of diversified into a number of different technical areas and now means that everyone's a DevOps guy. Everyone's a security guy. Everyone's an architect. Everyone's an engineer.
Or should be.
Well, they need to be, otherwise they can't get hired. So I think one of the things that, for me, that was quite significant was that realization quite some time ago now that the transition of this industry is not really changing. I will say packet pushers was a big part of that realization for me over the last 10 years or so as well. To sit at home and have Greg and Ethan sort of pouring in my ears about Python this, Python that, it kind of woke me up to the realization that, I can't be smashing keyboards for the rest of my career to kind of get configurations in. So I would say it was probably about 10 years ago that I first made the transition into automation first where I could. Ansible, BitPython, Kubernetes at version 1.9, that was a vibe. And one of the reasons why I got this job in the first place was because I came into the interviews and the discussion saying that I wanted to be automation first. I wanted to be automation forward. And that's how you scale. The business wants more and more every day. It doesn't matter what business it is, not just mine. Everyone expects more with less. So being able to leverage the net DevOps concept, if you want to call it that, or infrastructure as code as kind of the simplest kind of implementation of this, is a key factor to, the way things have moved in the last few years. So it was unavoidable, to answer your question.
So you got on the train instead of trying to stop it in its tracks.
I would like to see more and more people getting on the train too. I don't want it to be like something that's tearing through Mumbai where there's people on the roof and hanging out the windows. You need to make sure everyone's comfortable. But everyone get a seat. Some people might have first, some people might have second. But I do think that the train needs to get bigger too. And for me, with a little bit of the way my personality works, I think it's good that we as a community collaborate, which is why AutoCon is such a fabulous setting for us to kind of get together and have these conversations as a group. And I think that we really should be in a position to support each other, making this transition from classical network engineering to whatever we want to call this new thing.
So you referenced AutoCon 3, that's a network automation conference, and this recording is based off a talk that you gave at AutoCon 3, a lightning talk about using Vault as a way to avoid leaking secrets to attackers. We've talked a little bit about what secrets are talking about. How did you set up Vault to serve this function?
So, first bit of advice to the listener on their way to work, try not to do this. I guarantee you, if you go into your organization, go in your Slack group, your Teams channel, and just say, hey, who's got Vault installed? I guarantee you probably do already. Now, if you don't, then your first point of call is to talk to your security team and say, I think I should be using this, and probably you're going to get a big gold star and a pat on the back. And realistically, what you should then be doing is deciding how it is you want to move forward with this in a slightly more progressive way. But the best way to have that conversation is to start with some knowledge and some understanding of how the tool works. I'm a very practical learner. I do things and things kind of come off the back of it. So the blog series, I think, is a very good way to kind of get moving. But realistically, what you should be doing is asking yourself, how is it that I'm interacting with my infrastructure today? What are the tools that I already use? And how can I supplement that so that I can add this layer of security on top, or add this layer of simplification on top, so that I don't have to spend my day typing in that password every time that workflow wants to run, or making sure I'm logged into the correct server with the correct virtual environment activated. There is so many activities that we take to be able to make an automation workflow operate, that this is actually going to make life easier, but you just have to get there first.
Yeah, so I guess the problem you were trying to solve was you want to make sure, as you referenced earlier, important secrets aren't hard-coded into code. So how does Vault help you solve that problem?
It exposes your secrets as a network service, let's say it like that. So immediately that sounds bad, but the idea is that you have this service that runs on the network somewhere that it basically stores your information in a secure, encrypted on disk format. You make sure that it's secured with TLS with proper certificates so that you know you're talking to the right box when you then log into it. And then there's a number of different authentication schemes you can use to log into the box. The most common, simplest starting point is a token itself. So what you end up with is you take your password and your username from your workflow, you put it into Vault, and then you replace that with a couple of API calls that just say, please, can I have this password? Here is my token. So it's like I'm replacing a password with a password. Straight away, I'm like, why would I do that? That seems like I'm just moving the problem elsewhere. But the ability to manage the scope and the control of that token is very powerful. But also, you can make it machine specific or workplace specific or location specific. You can limit the amount of time that it's valid for. So there's a number of options that you can use to make it that your code doesn't contain any secrets whatsoever. They just have a placeholder that you insert an authentication token into, and then it can use that to then reach out to Vault and say, give me that private material, please. You're moving the problem around, but you're putting it into a place that is easier to control.
Well, and it sounds like you're downscoping that too. One of the things I know we've talked about in security in the recent years is using identity and tightly scoped authorizations as a form of, zero trust enforcement and or microsegmentation enforcement, where the blast radius of somebody getting that, in this case, you're describing like a token, and the privilege that that token has is specific to that exact need, like you said, on a specific host or machine or a service, et cetera. So it's not like the equivalent of getting, a root password or an API key that just has, the keys to the kingdom and whatever you're accessing. Is that what we're aiming for here?
Absolutely correct. And I think one of the things that I particularly like about it is that, let's say, for example, I have a workflow that's going to deploy a configuration to a switch. Simple, right? I'm going to chuck a VLAN on a device or a collection of devices. My workflow will have some code inside of it that will go and fetch the username and password to log into the switch, let's say. I can control that token that says you're only allowed from this machine to then connect to Vault and access this one secret, which is the username and password that has the permissions to deploy a VLAN. So you can create an RBAC group, so to speak, on your network devices that has limited scope. You then have a credential that's assigned to that. You then make the token that you're going to use inside that workflow only able to access that credential. And finally, if you ever then in a position where you think that information is leaked somehow, you rotate it once in Vault, and all of your other workflows, they just continue operating the way they did before.
Got it.
So you're shifting the burden of effort for changing something to one single source, which is the Vault system itself. That's a little bit advanced because, I've got a separate username and a separate this and a separate... You could just have a username and password that has read-write and a username and password that is read-only. For all of your workflows that just need to look at something, you go get the read-only account. For all the things that need to change something, they get the read-write account. Start small and grow.
So what's the barrier to entry? Because John, let's just level set here. You've had a 20 plus year history of, infrastructure and managing, especially where you are now, I'm sure, complex infrastructures and things that have to scale quickly. So automation, I think, is just like you said, you've been doing this for 10 years. I think maybe you overestimate where the rest of network engineers are, maybe the bulk of them are, coming out of, traditional LAN-based networking where they've been, doing their whatever, their HP, their Cisco, their Arista, et cetera. So when we're kind of talking about like this level of automation and tools and things like Vault and some of the other stuff you're going to be sharing, what is that, you must be this tall to ride the ride from a network management perspective? What do they need to have? Can they take their Cisco whatever, their Aruba whatever, their Juniper whatever, and then just go, hey, I'm going to do this? Or are there certain requirements or other tools for those automation workflows that we need?
There has been a lot of debate in the AutoCon arena about the place of Ansible inside of network automation and engineering. And I'm a fan. I grew up on this tool. And I don't use it anymore because I've reached a level of scale that it's not particularly fantastic for. But it's got to be said that it is a fantastic way for someone who needs to get something done repetitively to be able to walk up, not really write code, and get some actual value back. And Vault sits very nicely within the Ansible ecosystem. And I've got some examples in the blog where you can fetch your secrets from there and you don't have to bury them inside of your Ansible repository. So really, how high do you have to be to ride the ride? As high as you need to be able to do something, anything. This is not something that, particularly if, like I said, your organization probably already has one of these. So if you don't have to stand up all of the infrastructure around it, your life is a lot easier. You're a tenant. You just get a couple of tokens and off you go to the races. But if you have to build this from scratch, then yeah, sure, it's not trivial. But it's not impossible either, as we demonstrate.
So it sounds like you've built this as a service for others to consume in the organization, yes?
Well, as I said, I spoke to my security team and they already had one. So what happened was, in essence, we built a non-production instance for ourselves. And we used that to learn the tool. And then we kind of realized that there was already a couple of these. There was 3, in fact, at one point. Because shadow IT, everybody.
That's a whole different problem.
So we all consolidated down onto one big cluster. So that was actually an operation that we took, we didn't realize, but we realized there was one team that had theirs, another team had theirs, and then my team come along and build ours. I'm like, this is silly. Why are we doing this? So we all came together and there was a small project to create a supercluster, and it all kind of got moved into the right direction. But yeah, like I say, I think for us, it was actually very easy to kind of get on board because, like I said, the documentation is fantastic. The examples that you can find to be able to crib from on the internet are everywhere. And I believe that once you kind of understand the primitives, the rest starts to roll quite easily because this is one very small section of the stack. The whole developer experience within network automation is a hot topic with so many different edges to go down. But specifically for this particular corner of it, it's actually not that bad. It's quite approachable.
So there's building it, but then, when you're rolling it out and telling people, this is how we do things now, did it require a change in people's workflow or people's habits? And if so, how do you encourage that change? How do you make it stick?
I believe that the hardest thing was to actually try and get people to grok that they shouldn't be just using their SSH keys on their jump hosts anymore. There was a kind of normality and a regularity to what they were doing in the past. Once we actually I think I spent a couple of weekends creating a couple of utility libraries. So basically I made it, if it's already easy to do, I made it bulletproof. So there's 2 functions, one to log in and one to fetch a secret. You just put this into your code and off you go. I tried to provide a couple of these examples in the Git repository that was accompanying the talk. And the link is in the show notes so people can kind of go see for themselves. But where there's 5 or 6 functions that you would normally do to log in, test your tokens right, and go through these motions, you can abstract them into 1 or 2. And then everyone's like, oh no, this is easier. So was it hard? Actually, no. Because people actually started to see the value for themselves. And I think Netflix called this the paved road. And developer experience it's an entire job description. It's a whole section of modern industry now, particularly in tech companies, where the developer experience is all about building tooling that make developers more effective. And that's exactly what we're doing here. So I'm cosplaying as a developer experience guy today, and tomorrow I'll be designing something else. It's where we are, right?
So it wasn't about, sort of having to beat people into compliance. You showed them, here's a nice, easy path that I've built for you. Please drive down it.
In summary, I think the quickest way to put it is, if you build it, they will come.
Okay, that's what I was thinking in my head, but I was like, is John going to know a baseball reference? So I left that, but yes, you got it.
This is the thing, right? The main thing for us was that we wanted to make it easier for people to make good choices. That is the whole kit and caboodle when it comes to the privacy ecosystem that, we as a company are trying to embody. We want to make sure that people find these things easy to use. So we dog food this, right? It's not just us preaching this out to the community and our end users as a whole. Inside the organization, we really do take this stuff seriously.
So one thing that also came up in your talk is a tool called TruffleHog. And the first time I heard you say that, I was like, are we going to Narnia now? What is TruffleHog? How does it fit into this project that you discussed at AutoCon?
It's a fabulous name. I can't do it as good.
You're welcome, everybody.
I'm going to let you bathe in that one for a moment. That's fine.
Well, I'll sit with that for a minute.
Well, TruffleHog in the real world is a pig that goes out and it finds these valuable, fantastic truffle mushrooms, which then people put far too heavily onto food that you can't then taste anything but truffle afterwards. But they're very expensive, aren't they? A couple of little grates of that fancy thing in a restaurant, it's like 10 grand. So TruffleHog, the idea is that it is a tool, you point it at a Git repository, and it goes on a little snuffle around in all of the branches and all the history and every commit across all time, and it will use a bunch of rules to figure out, oh, he committed some AWS keys. Oh, she's committed a password. Oh, they have done something mad. And the idea is that it will find any secret that it can find dug inside of your Git repositories and turn them into a report. And if you tick a box, it'll even test if they're valid as well. So I'll tell you what was fascinating while I was actually building this whole presentation and the Git repository, I was committing actual secrets into GitHub. So I had real private keys, they were completely garbage. I generated them on my laptop, but I committed them in. And guess what happened? Within 5 minutes, I received an email from a managed service that checks every single Git commit and says, you just committed a password. You just committed an SSH key. You just committed an RSA private key for a certificate. Are you mad?
Does it come with the judgmental notations?
It really did. I felt so condescended to. It was like a moody principal at the school saying, you kid, you did wrong. I almost imagine like McGonagall standing there. Why is it always you three? But it was.
I assume this is an external third-party tool that you just point at your Git, not something built into Git.
Public open source. I think it started off as a labor of passion by a couple of guys who really loved the idea of threat hunting. And this was a threat that they wanted to hunt for. I believe that it's all well and good to commit something to Git. You could do that on your laptop, say git commit, blah, blah, blah. And that's on your machine. You can undo that if you're clever. But most people have to just delete the Git repository and start again. Because once a secret's in, it's in. If you ever push it somewhere, now you're in trouble.
When it's searching, is it just kind of like regexing across, common strings of, like we would old DLP with social security numbers, credit card numbers? It's just kind of looking for those patterns of secrets?
Yeah, I think that's the majority of tool there are a couple of bits of magic in there, but yeah, generally speaking, it's a signature-based approach, yes.
Okay. So you said it's an open source project, so you just went out and started using it. Did you have to set it up as a service yourself, or it's available as a service? How did you incorporate it into your workflow?
You'd go to the Git repo. There's the lovely README file with lots of good instructions. I think there is actually like an advanced version that you can either subscribe to or pay for that will allow you to kind of install this offline as a persistent activity. But TruffleHog is a great way to kind of point in time check a repo. There are other tools in part of the DevSecOps is what they call it, isn't it? So there's one called Bandit, which is a Python security checker. There's another one called semgrep. Semgrep is another tool that will basically, every time you commit anything into the Git repository, it's not just looking for secrets and for passwords, it's also looking for you doing silly things. Oh no, sir, you shouldn't have something called token. So even if you don't have a token there, are you sure you want to have token in your code at this point? So there's a bunch of not just pattern-based behaviors, but also bad patterns that you shouldn't be following in design patterns-wise. So it's not just regexing this is a token. It's also, are you sure you want to do something like that? And again, in the presentation, one of the things that I kind of pointed out, particularly when I was highlighting the problem, often you'll see these little hashtags, these comments across code, no sec, no semgrep. People are sort of, I've just been told off by, again, the naughty principal telling me because you shouldn't commit that. People turn the alerts off, and that's dangerous. One line that Ethan loved, he still kind of pats me on the back. So every single time we turn off TLS verification, every time we disable some level of security protection, we disable semgrep, we disable these checking on our repos. It's a gift to a ransomware attacker, to an access broker. You're making their job easier. So every day you make your job easier by turning off security, you're making their job easier too.
Yeah, the not validating server certificates for anything in life just boggles my mind.
I'll tell you what, it's a pattern that we've beat ourselves into submission of the box that says, oh, not verified. Fine, turn it off. And it's almost like we've kind of given up. So one of the things that we show in Git repo and in the tool, we use Terraform to create a PKI, a full signing infrastructure that will give you root certs and issuing certs, and the ability to create certificates and private keys on demand in this Vault infrastructure so that you can make a single request that says, can I have this name secured, basically, with a certificate that I in my organization can trust. So that there is the ability to sign a certificate and to know that I can trust that certificate. And in doing so, turn off these silly things that block our ability to secure our infrastructure correctly.
So the PKI, the certificate validation settings, all of that is just baked into your automation workflows as well.
Absolutely. If a certificate is not verified, we do not proceed.
As it should be.
Yeah, but like I said, we've convinced ourselves as an industry that this is a box we can tick. And I want to try and turn that back.
Yeah. And I mean, I think at least in other parts of infrastructure and networking, we're seeing the protocols, especially like on the wireless side, as we get into the newer wireless security suites, like we're actually seeing restrictions now to not allow server certificate bypasses and to take that out of, the end user can't do that. And the whole protocol and the authentication won't work if you like it. It's just not an option, basically. So I'm totally with you. I think that's a fantastic path for us all to go down, is to just disable that, because even in lab testing, which was the argument, right? Like, okay, well, we need to test these things. You might not have all this other stuff set up, but at this point, we're at a place in time where that also just does not make sense. And you should have the whole flow into your automation workflow like you're describing.
I would say that Let's Encrypt was the starting gun that was fired. Now that we have tools like Acme, we have functionality like Vault offers, there's also things like, if you're in a pipeline, you just need certificates that you can trust that are completely ephemeral and destroyable. You can use a tool like CertStrap, which I'll give a link for, which literally just a couple of one-liners, and there's a CA and there's the ability to have certificates that you can use in a CI pipeline. And then the whole thing's destroyed at the end of it. It's fantastic. So yeah, I think that we've normalized now that automation around certificate authorities and issuing of certificates is there. The community's just got to catch up.
So we've been talking about Vault, which is a HashiCorp product. There are other options, including OpenBao, which I understand is an open source fork of Vault. Do you have thoughts on one or the other, what someone should be looking at if they are the only ones in their org doing this?
Open source drama llamas. There are many people who are giving out thought leadership on HashiCorp and the way that they decided to switch their licensing. I don't particularly have a strong opinion on it in that sense. I think every organization should spend the time to actually read the license agreements that are attached to the code in the open source domain so they can make a decision that fits their needs. But what I would say is that right now, there are a number of secret management solutions out there. And I think that Vault is just the one that everyone knows. It's become like Dyson or Hoover. You know, they're brand names that all of a sudden are synonymous with a service. So I don't think that Vault means Vault. Really, it should be Secret Store. But trying to get someone to change the vernacular this late in the game is a bit silly. So what I will say about OpenBao is that initially when we kind of assessed the fork, same with OpenTofu against Terraform, we didn't really see that there was much that we had to worry about. And I say we, I'm talking about the industry, the network automation group. And I believe that the tide is starting to turn slightly on that one because the OpenBao maintainers are pretty forward-thinking. They're pushing new features. They're starting to deliver features that people have been wanting for a long time that were only available in the paid version of Vault. So this is where the conversation can change. What I do know is that, you know, when we actually made the switch between one to the other, it was relatively simple for us. And I know that the community is realizing that at the moment they're one-to-one exchangeable. You can literally just swap Vault for Bao and be happy. It won't always be like that. You know, I don't know how well this is going to age, but reality is that you need to make the right decision for your organization. And for some people, it may be more of a political thing that, you know, I want to back the open source guys. You do you, right?
My understanding is that the folks who initiated OpenBao were IBM developers, and IBM also owns HashiCorp, which owns Vault. So it feels like it's kind of one or the other, right? Or they get you either way.
I haven't paid that much attention, if I'm honest. I look at things at face value. And for me, I think the main thing that I look at is the feature, the functionality, the sustainability of that project, because sustainability is a big concern for others. But, you know, we're enthusiasts in the open source space. We want to see projects thrive and we want to see success. And we follow those goals.
So John, just to wrap up then, any final thoughts or takeaways for folks who have heard this, they're digesting it, they're thinking, okay, this is something maybe I want to play with?
The main thing I want to try and leave people with is give them an opportunity to realize this may seem complicated and this may seem like something that is maybe outside of the normal realm of network automation or network tooling or security automation as a concept, but it doesn't have to be. The main thing really is that this is a tool that, imagine the coffee machine you have in the morning, right? You don't really know how it works properly, but it gives you a tasty, delicious drink. And the main thing is to sort of understand that you don't have to be an expert in it to operate it. So what I like to do with this particular repository and with the whole series of blogs is to give people enough knowledge to go beyond being dangerous, right? Because that's the common phrase. I'm going to give you enough knowledge to be dangerous. That's dangerous. It's in the name, right?
Right.
So what I'd like to try and do is make sure that people realize that you can get to an element of safety quickly. And then from there, you can start to get some confidence and understanding in how the tooling can help you. And at the end of the day, start with something simple. Throw your usernames and passwords for your devices in it and fetch them from there instead of having them either prompted to the user to type in at the command prompt or to depend upon the fact that you are blessed in a particular place before you can move forward with the next stage of your automation. If you shove them into a Vault, and even if you just fetch it off the local machine, you've made a step forward. So I think that one's the first piece that I wanted to kind of get to. The second part is that once you've got Vault, it goes beyond the coffee machine. It's more like a Swiss Army knife. It's got so many other features that you may or may not knew that you needed, but you can extend it into your cloud environment. So you can manage your IAM credentials, manage your ability to log into this particular service or access this service. There's a really cool feature for creating database accounts on demand or user accounts on demand. So I go to Vault, I say I need to log into thing, it will create credentials on that thing for me and then reply back to me with the credentials I can now use. There are whole products that build this. It's available for free. So I think that to me is a good opportunity to then build a business case if you feel you need it to land and expand, as they say. The last one, which is very near and dear to my heart, is that, we believe that encryption needs to be everywhere at all time. And one of the things about encryption is it's really quite hard to do it right. So the golden rule is never roll your own encryption. Ask Telegram. Sorry, cheap jibe. But the difficulty is for most people is I don't know how I would even begin to do that. But you've got HIPAA, you've got PCI, you've got SOC, you've got, I don't know, ISO something, 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 something. There are a number of requirements that are placed upon us as engineers to ensure that data at rest and data in transit is always secure and safe and only visible and accessible to the person that needs it, the rule of least privilege, as they call it. If you can't do that with the platform you have, there's a lovely little feature inside of Vault called transit encryption, where you can take a block of text that's inside your program that you can't put on into a log or put into another system because it's PII of some sort. You go to Vault over a TLS transaction and say, hey, could you encrypt this for me, please? And he'll send you back a block of text, which is now only reversible by the same token. You can now put that anywhere you want. Stick it in a USB stick, stick it in the car. It doesn't matter because it is now encrypted in a safe manner. Something later in your workflow or something later, like if you put it in logs, someone now needs to work out what happened on that day, or I need that piece of information. You can take the ciphertext, give it to Vault, and it will give you back the plain text. So you can now offload this whole complexity of how do I build encryption? How do I build? If your product doesn't have it, or if you're building something from scratch, give it over. Vault, do it instead. I think that in and of itself is a feature that so many people would leverage if they knew it was there. But it's like one little box in the corner of the window. It's a bit hiding in plain sight, which is ironic. So yeah, I think as I kind of take a step back and look at what the point of this whole exercise is that Vault is probably one of the most visible tools out in the DevSecOps space that network engineers aren't using. They don't know what it is. They don't know why they would use it. So making that accessible to people is where I want to start. But then I think the second part is that because we as engineers are being dragged into so many different directions with so many new hats and so many more roles, responsibilities, I think it's important that we as engineers have the opportunity to leverage and look into our neighbors in DevOps, in software engineering, in these different areas of the business and be able to steal their good ideas. Imitation is the greatest form of flattery, right?
Don't they say good musicians copy, great musicians steal or something?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So that why can't we, instead of cosplaying as a software engineer and then having to do some Taylor Swift style rapid costume change into being an SRE today and a security analyst tomorrow, why don't I just get them to help me do what I do?
Yeah.
So I believe that the industry is moving us towards this concept. The great Matt Oswalt was sharing maybe 10 years ago now about network reliability engineering. So stealing all of the thoughts and processes that we had in the SRE book from Google and putting it in a networking context. I believe that we are seeing more and more of us moving in that direction. And Vault is just its base camp. We're now looking up at Everest and there's a ton of other tools. So the more that we start to leverage the developer experience that we see in other parts of the business, the more likely we can actually move forward. And there's an anxiety amongst the networking community where, oh God, I don't want to be a programmer. I don't want to be like, there are so many people who have this fear that they're going to be replaced by the next generation MCP from ChatGPT or something.
Right.
No, you won't, because you need the networking knowledge. So why don't we just use these tools to make us better rather than fear that those tools are going to replace us, because it's never going to happen.
Yeah, that's great. That's encouraging. Well, John, thank you for sharing your experience with us, for bringing Vault hopefully to some folks' attention. We will have links in the show notes, as we mentioned, to your blog series, to a summary of your talk that you gave at AutoCon 3. And if the video comes out, we'll have a link to that as well. Also to the Git repo you mentioned that's sharing the stuff you've done. Anything else you want to let folks know about you, where you can be found if they want to get in touch with you?
I am always permanently available in the Packet Pusher Slack channel because I don't know why. It's just where I am. It's where I spend my day. I'm sure I'm supposed to do work at some point or other, but if you are trying to break into this, trying to figure out where to go next, then of course you can come find me there. And I'm happy to support people along this journey because it's challenging.
For sure. Well, thank you, John, for being with us. And thanks to the listeners for joining us for another episode of Packet Protector. If you have a topic you want us to cover, or a comment or a correction or a question, you can reach out at packetpushers.net/FU. We do love the follow-up, and we appreciate when listeners reach out. And as John mentioned, Packet Protector is part of the Packet Pushers podcast network. That network includes a dozen technical podcasts for your professional development on things like networking, security, DevOps, and more. There's the industry blog, 2 weekly newsletters, the community Slack group where you can find John and others, plus a YouTube channel, even an IRC group. It's all at packetpushers.net, all free, no login required. And as always, remember to do those security push-ups.